Okay, everyone, this is the regular meeting of the Garden City Planning Commission. It's Thursday, August 10th, 2023. It's 6:30 p.m. I'd like to call the meeting to order. And our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. If everyone would stand, please. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Be seated. Would the secretary take the roll call, please?
Chairperson May.
Here.
Commissioner Steenberg.
Here.
Commissioner Turnbull. Here. Commissioner Walls.
Here.
Commissioner Kalidas. Commissioner King. Here. We got quorum of 5.
Okay, next we need approval of the agenda. If someone would care to make a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve today's agenda.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any comments or discussion? Would you take the roll, please?
Commissioner King.
Aye.
Commissioner Turnbull.
Aye.
Commissioner Walls.
Aye.
Commissioner Steenberg.
Aye.
Chairperson May.
Aye. Approval of minutes from the regular meeting of July 13th, 2023.
Make a motion.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded to approve the minutes. Any comments, discussion, or corrections? Hearing none, would you take the roll?
Commissioner Walls.
Aye.
Commissioner Steenberg.
Aye.
Commissioner King.
Aye.
Commissioner Turnbull. Chairperson May.
Aye. Next item is public comments on non-agenda items only. This is something that's not on the agenda. If anyone wishes to come forward and speak, you can do that now. I don't see anyone standing or raising their hands, so we'll move on to the next item. The business item is PPL 23-0007. This is a request for a special land use recommendation and a site plan approval to establish a drive-through restaurant at 29060 Ford Road in the CBD, the Central Business District. We're having a public hearing on this as it is a special land use recommendation. And the purpose of that is for anyone who wishes to come forward and make comments about the proposal, they'll be able to do that. To start out, we can start with the presentation of our consultant's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. As mentioned, we're here to consider this proposed use. The site is located at the northeast corner of Ford Road and Central Avenue. It's currently occupied by the mini golf amusement park. So it's the mini golf location, it's the parking lot located to the north of that, and it's also the grass lot located to the north of that on the corner of Crowder and Central. So that comprises 4 tax parcels, and that's the entire scope of the site. And the applicant is proposing to demolish those current uses and construct a new restaurant with a drive-through window. This does require special use review and approval. With regard to that, the first thing the zoning ordinance asks us to look at the compatibility with adjacent uses. The site is located along Ford Road, which is the principal commercial corridor in the city, and is also located in Garden City downtown. The majority of the site is surrounded by commercial uses, including to the south, east, and west. It's zoned Central Business District in those directions, and the uses on the south, east, and west are commercial as well. To the north, it's actually zoned R3, multifamily residential, and to the north, on the north side of Crowder, are single-family residences. So with regard to this site and the proposed configuration, one thing we point out too is it's similar to a situation we have on the south side of Ford Road with our commercial businesses and their relationship to Pardo. On the south side of Ford Road, you have parcels that are commercial operated. They run the entire length of the block
and they go down to Pardo. And then on the south side of Pardo are single-family homes that are zoned R3, multifamily residential. So this would be a similar condition to what's existing in some parts of the area. So I just wanted to point that out and relate, and to give you an idea as to what the potential development would look like in the future in terms of that relationship. So we believe that, though, that given the existing commercial uses surrounding the site and the commercial nature of the entire corridor, the proposed use would be compatible with the majority of the adjacent uses. With regards to the residential uses to the north, the zoning ordinance does have requirements to propose standards such as screening and landscaping to encourage compatibility, and we can get at, and we'll, so as part of any kind of approval, we would recommend that that also be considered as a requirement when it comes to their site plan review. But we do believe this proposed use would be compatible in this current location, proposed location. We also look at compatibility with the master plan. The master plan actually also designates this property, the southern half of this property, and property to the south, east, and west as central business district. So that's an area that's intended to be the primary and central commercial area in the city. One thing we note as well is that the core downtown, which is centered at Ford Road and Middle Belt, that's envisioned to be it's trying to be a pedestrian-oriented commercial area. And then the uses moving away from the core tend to start to transition, or envisioned to transition, to auto-oriented uses. And that's mainly due to the fact of the character of the corridor being a high-volume traffic corridor. So we believe this proposed use in this location begins that transition away from the core to occasionally having auto-oriented uses. So this proposed use, we do believe, would also be compatible with the master plan. With regards to other criteria, such as public services, the site is located on the Ford Road corridor that provides all the necessary utilities, the main connections for these utilities. The use itself isn't going to be a high-demand use. It's typical of a commercial with regards to the amount of utilities proposed. In regard to the impact on traffic, while Ford Road does have a high volume of traffic, it's intended and designed to provide that service for vehicles. So while this would increase the traffic volume, there's really no other road in the city that could be designed to accommodate any additional traffic volume. I mean, Ford Road is supposed to be the road in which handles our traffic volume. So this would be the site that, this site would be functional by being located on Ford Road. With regards to the other criteria, we do believe that the proposed use is in compliance with those standards. So in the end, when it comes to this special land use question, we would advise the Planning Commission to recommend approval of the proposed drive-through use to the City Council based on meeting the requirements of the ordinance. So that's the end of the special land use questions. We can pause there and consider that question, or move on to site plan at a later.
I only have one question. Is the total of the parcel zone the same as Central Business District?
Yes, the entire parcel is zoned Central Business District.
All the way to Crowder?
Yep.
Okay. If there's no other questions at this time, we can reserve them maybe for our discussion later on. We can move on to the presentation by the applicant. Is a representative for the applicant here? Would you step forward, please, and tell us who you are?
Okay, there's three of us here.
Okay, well, you can all come up if you want.
My name is Patrick Clary. I'm with Watts Engineering. We're responsible for the site work. And then we have the representative client.
Yeah, I'm Anna Pelhenk. I'm a senior project engineer with Restaurant Holdings, and we're the project owner.
And she
Okay.
can speak to the building, I'll speak to the site. We can we've brought boards, we can speak as long or short as you want us to.
Well, if you have something you'd like to say now, that would be fine. If you want to wait until we have questions or comments later on, we can do it then.
I think most of the comments from the planner related to the site plan review, and maybe we just defer to have him do that presentation.
That would be fine,
And
yeah.
address those at that time. I think
You have
that was-
another opportunity then.
Yeah, so I don't think the special use, there was really any concerns or issues there, correct? So,
Okay,
Can I
Right.
ask one question?
okay.
Just when do you plan on breaking ground if you're approved?
That would really depends on when we get, all of our approvals, and, if it is kind of like later on the year, we're probably gonna wait until the spring, just because of the weather. But if possible, we'd like to start this year, maybe September, late September, October, but it really depends.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on then. We'll open the public hearing. If there's someone who wishes to come forward and have comments on this proposal, identify yourself and write down your name and address.
Name's John Murray, live on Lather Street. My question right now is, do they own the property? Or is the sale pending the approval of this? My other concern is access into the structure off of M153. We have Checkers and King Cone that at times, because they have drive-through, that the vehicles have stopped on Ford Road. And if you go to the chicken place at Ford and Wildwood, which has reasonable amount of parking, but they have also impacted Ford Road. So can you guys or the applicant make some sort of a commitment that access to the service is gonna come off of either Crowder or Central, and you can discharge onto Ford Road, but there's no entrance into the facility? I'm not sure.
That'll be discussed during the site plan.
Pardon?
That'll be discussed when we talk about the site plan. We're talking about the special land use now, and the site plan comes later.
Okay, and I was, because it's for the change of the site, that's why I brought it up here. And I'm just concerned about, you know, protecting everybody. And, you know, new businesses are always welcomed in this town.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to come forward? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Commission. My name is Robert Gonzalez. I live right here on Beechwood, just off of where this site plan is proposed. I just want to say that I missed the gentleman's beginning discussion regarding the site plan, but I just wanted to let you, I am opposed to having another restaurant, especially with a drive-through built here. You know, this town is already peppered with fast food restaurants and drive-throughs. I heard this gentleman speak of where the flow of traffic would be. Now, I moved to this community almost 20 years ago, partly because of the convenience. We had a grocery store right here that we'd walk to. We had a Kmart over here that we used to go to. I'm not saying I'm opposed to a business being there, but I definitely am opposed to a restaurant with a drive-through. In my mind, it tells me it's a fast food restaurant. And the gentleman's right. We're not gonna jam up Ford Road with people coming in to drive-through to get something to eat. That means the overflow is gonna end up on Central Avenue, which I'm definitely opposed of. With the events that we hold here, we hold the parades that come down Central Avenue, and I just don't see how that's gonna benefit this community, another restaurant or a fast food joint. What we really need in this town is a grocery store. We lost the Kroger, we do not have a when the Kmart's gone, and there's really nowhere else in the city of Garden City for us to go shop except for the Kroger on Warren, which is very inconvenient, and if you've had to shop there, it's not the best place to shop. The Aldi down the street is okay. You know, they don't have a meat department and things like that. But in my opinion, I just don't see us having to use that particular property to put another food joint with the drive-through.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else wish to comment?
Good afternoon. My name is Rick Roberts. I live at 2903 Crowder, directly behind this facility. My concern, I'm all for growth and new business. There's no problems with that. The Putt-Putt has been a great neighbor. He's always kept everything nice about it. The noise, everything's been great. I've been living there for 32 years. I'm a resident of about 53 years in Garden City. I was only gone for about 8 years. But my concerns I know I've had neighbors down the street with the fast food by Kentucky Fried Chicken and other restaurants. First and foremost is the smell coming across into my yard, the lights, and then also the volume of the drive-through. I see that all the time with the speakers. I'll be hearing that all the time. What are the hours of this facility? My other concern is, like he had mentioned, to be honest with you, I'm not concerned about back up on Ford Road. What I'm concerned about is when people try to leave and they can't get onto Ford Road, they're gonna make a right, go down Central, make a right on Crowder, and I'll have all this traffic going down Crowder all the way back maybe to the light or something like that. And I'll have all this increased traffic just taking up noise and sounds and stuff. And again, I'm not opposed to a different business coming in there. It's a matter of time. My concern is the noise and then the amount of traffic. And then when it comes to if it does get finalized, I would need some type of barrier. Right now, the Putt-Putt, we have the trees and stuff like that. And because of the times that's open, it's not a big deal because it closes fairly early. But the headlights and everything, just putting some bushes and stuff like that, that would not go well with me. I would need a berm or some kind of nice, wall, something that can keep the sound and the headlights and all that away. I just, love Garden City. I just spent some money in making my house even better, additions and yards and stuff like that. Just concerned about what the effect of this business is going to be. That's my concerns. Okay.
Okay, thank you,
All right,
sir.
thank you.
Does anyone else wish to step up?
Hello, and thank you for all that you do for our city. My name is Elizabeth Roberts. I am the wife of Richard, so I live directly across the street from where this is proposed. I was under the assumption that the back part, the green belt on that, was rated residential, not commercial. I thought it was for multiple housing, multiple family units. If you go down our street, there are 3 houses. So it's the Putt-Putt course, the very large house that had the fence around it. There are 3 homes, and then just the parking lot of Salvation Army, the back part. And the rest of our street is houses. None of the other businesses on Ford Road, from where you come in on Central to where you get all the way down to Harrison, there are no businesses that come all the way up to Crowder. They all end at the middle of the street. Why are we proposing allowing this one to come all the way back? Is this something they're going to do? Are they going to try to buy out the 3 other houses and put businesses straight across that street? It's just a concern. We bought our house, we raised our children. The traffic on Pardo with the businesses there is very fast. People fly down that. We have the elementary school in our neighborhood. There's a bus stop on the corner near us. That's going to increase the traffic for the kids getting on and off the buses. Has that been taken into consideration? What about the high school? The amount of high schoolers that walk down our street when school is in session is a lot. Have you thought of the impact of the traffic for the kids walking up and down the street? And I mean, they walk in the middle of the street. They don't use sidewalks over there. So has that been brought into consideration? Just a couple ideas, thoughts maybe you guys hadn't thought of. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to come up and have a comment? Okay. Seeing no one at this time, we'll move on Do we have any written communications?
We did not receive any written communications.
Okay, thank you. Then at this time, it's 6:50. We'll close the public hearing and move on to the Planning Commission discussion and recommendations. All right, we have just at this time, just the special land use recommendation to consider. We're not considering the site plan until a little later. Does anyone have any comments or any discussion? Yes.
To Mario, in spite of what you said, it was probably about 20 years ago when the city spent somewhere in the neighborhood of $250,000 to have a firm in Ann Arbor take a look at our city and what we could do to improve it. And one of the things that was highlighted during that report was to make the city more walkable. And at that point, we started to require the businesses to put their front doors back on Ford Road where the sidewalks are at. And this is right there in that area where we deemed to be the walkable portion of the city. And we're gonna add vehicular traffic to that, which, as we all know, discourages people walking and browsing, maybe walking up and down a portion of the city there to go to one or two or multiple businesses. So is this really something that is following our 5-year master plan, which we work pretty diligently on every 5 years?
Well, with regard to the front door and the other type of pedestrian amenities, it kind of delves into the site plan issues a little bit. They are required to have a front door on the front of the building. They haven't proposed it yet. Our recommendation is that they put a front door there, also have a pedestrian connection from the Ford Road sidewalk to the building, and then also make sure that they install a sidewalk on Crowder, which right now it doesn't exist. So at least they have those pedestrian amenities. But the overall question of whether having a drive-through use in the central business district, that is a good question with regards to whether that's compatible with the overall vision of the central business district. So I think that's the reason why it's listed as a special land use rather than a permitted by right use. And I think the city has struggled with that question because, as we all know, the McDonald's site, that corner sat vacant for over 10 years because everyone was struggling with how to actually design it. And then in the end, they ended up being allowed to put in a drive-through right in the main corner of what we envisioned as being a pedestrian downtown. And I think it's just that they deemed that the site improvements were somewhat of the best they could hope for, I guess, in terms of the compromise and allowing that use. And then the way this site is being designed and proposed is pretty much similar to what the McDonald's is proposed as, in terms of configuration, access points, and screen. Well, the screening's a little bit different. But in the end, that's one of the reasons why it's a special land use, to determine whether the compatibility of this location with the criteria for a drive-through is appropriate. It's a tough question, but it's also the fact that, you've got one, like I said, McDonald's down there, and then you have Taco Bell right across the street. So it'd be hard pressed to try and have a justification as to why another one could not be allowed when these others have been permitted. Like, what criteria has changed since then? But at the same time, so I would think if we wanted to focus the downtown more on pedestrian-oriented things, we'd have to, for example, get rid of drive-throughs as a special use in the CBD. The fact that it's that they can go through this process begs the question is why is that being considered? You know, the most effective way to do that would be to no longer permit drive-throughs in the central business district, period, because we have them in C3. So,
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Could you just clarify the one question regarding the existing site? I know you referenced that north of the site is R3, but the subject site is all CBD.
right, the subject right is all zoned central business district. That entire block, from Ford to Crowder, and then from Central over to, is that Gilman, or is that Garden?
Garden.
That whole block is, the whole thing is zoned central business district. And then all the property on the north side of Crowder is actually zoned multifamily.
But there is no multifamily on the
No.
north side.
No, they're all single-family homes. And our zoning ordinance does permit single-family homes as a use within the multifamily district.
Yeah. Anything else? Any other comments or questions? Okay, well, if we have a motion to recommend approval, it should be also based on, it should be contingent on the applicant receiving site plan approval. So many of these questions will come up during site plan approval, and hopefully we can get it ironed out at that point. If someone wish to make a motion?
If I could just make a
Yeah.
comment, I think for the residents, there's really two questions. It's if we should do it, and then it's how we should do it, right? And so right now, we're
true.
answering if we should do it.
Yeah.
So I'll make a motion to approve that we would allow for the special land use of the site plan approval to establish a drive-through at 29060 Ford Road in the CBD, Central Business District,
Contingent on site plan?
contingent on site plan approval.
Okay.
Second.
Second? Comments on the motion? Secretary, take roll, please.
Commissioner King?
Aye.
Commissioner Walls?
Aye.
Commissioner Turnbull?
Aye.
Commissioner Steenberg?
Aye.
Chairperson May?
Aye. Okay, moving on to the site plan review. Mr. Ortega, would you
Yes.
like to continue with
So
this?
with regard to the site plan, there are several outstanding issues that need to be addressed that do attempt to deal with the issues raised as part of the use itself. But the first being the building design. The zoning ordinance does require that a front door be on the front facade, an entry door on the front facade. It does require that the building itself be comprised 75% of brick. And then the colors of the exterior building, exterior building colors must be deemed compatible with adjacent buildings by the planning commission. So all these are issues that the proposed elevations do not comply with, at least in the first two. So the planning commission would have, so applicant should revise the entry door to be on the front. They should revise the components of the building facade to be 75% brick. And then you should speak during your discussion as to whether you feel the colors as proposed are compatible with the adjacent. Now, looking at the parking, loading, and access management questions, as mentioned, this site is designed similarly to the McDonald's on Middlebelt. If you've ever visited that site, you know that the access point off of Middlebelt, there's some issues with the fact that customers visiting the site don't tend to adhere to the markings on the ground where they are intended to drive counterclockwise through the site in order to get to the drive-through. They drive into Middlebelt, from Middlebelt onto the site in a clockwise position and attempt to do a big sweeping turn to get into the drive-through. The business has tried to deal with this with different bollards and everything, and it just hasn't worked out. So we would recommend that for this particular site, on the Central Avenue access point, where the existing driveway is and the proposed driveway will be, that they put a raised curb island right in the curb access, the driveway curb cut, that will require entering vehicles to turn counterclockwise and then drive southbound around the front of the building and then enter the drive-through in a required, just like every other access point.
maintain the traffic
To maintain
flow.
the traffic flow on the site. And if need be, we also think probably it might be necessary to put raised bollards on the curb cut as well, because I've seen trucks just drive over the curb on Ford Road, so.
Yeah. Appropriate signage would.
Absolutely,
help
yes.
there, too.
And directional signage as well would be necessary. We also would recommend the applicant provide a truck turning movement diagram, just to confirm that emergency vehicles and tractor trailers that are doing deliveries and garbage trucks can access the site effectively. It might require some minor changes to the turning radii, so it looks like it should function, but we do recommend that they provide those graphics so we can confirm that all vehicles can access the site safely. Similar to that question, they need to identify where the loading zone is. They're proposing that deliveries are going to be made during non-peak hours and then occupy the drive-through lane. That's a question for the planning commission if you feel that's appropriate, a loading zone option. And then when it comes to screening, we talk with issues with regards to screening. First, along Ford and Central, there are specific design criteria in the Central Business District for the type of screening. It's either supposed to be a brick knee wall about 36 inches tall, or decorative fence with brick pillars along the foundation. And that right now, the applicant is proposing just a standard decorative fence, so that the screening on Ford and Central should be revised to comply with the zoning ordinance standards. With regards to landscape.
It doesn't address screening at the back of the site.
No, not yet, I'll get to that. Yeah.
Okay.
But that is one of the other important points. Because as you mentioned, there is necessary to provide that screening along Crowder. As proposed, they are proposing to keep the existing trees on Crowder. But then they also have a note about putting a low hedge at the edge of the parking area. There's a note there, but it's not shown on the landscape plan. So a method of screening that's appropriate should be illustrated along that Crowder Avenue, whether that's a 36-inch or 42-inch tall screening wall, or a landscape hedge. That's something that can be considered by the planning commission as what they feel is appropriate in that location for that. Because to deal with the headlights, because that is an issue that needs to be looked at and concerned with. There are some other minor questions with regards to movement of some trees, location of irrigation on a landscape plan, so the applicant needs to provide a revised landscape plan. And similarly, they need to provide a revised photometric plan. We have some recommendations as to turning the lights and shielding them so that all lighting is directly downward and also going south, so that way there's no additional glare to the north. These fixtures can be fitted with a particular shield or orientation of the lens, so therefore there's no light shining onto from the source itself, shining north.
And the photometric plan would illustrate that?
Yes. Right now, the photometric plan does show 0 light levels at the property line. We're just suggesting these additional measures to make sure that doesn't encroach even closer, because there are some light levels that are a little high, we feel, along that northern property line. But at the property line right now, it's 0, as in the lighting plan. I mentioned sidewalks. The applicant needs to provide entry sidewalk from Ford Road to the entry door on the front facade, and also a sidewalk along Crowder. And then we have some specific requirements when it comes to drive-throughs themselves. The first being that they are actually intended to have 150 feet of frontage. They actually have 145.2. So technically, they do need to get a variance from that standard with regards to lot width for a drive-through. So any kind of site plan approval should be contingent upon the applicant receiving a variance from that standard. The standard, that 150-foot standard, is usually what we found that MDOT requires for an adequate access point. But the applicant actually has already had conversations with MDOT, and in their letters, MDOT they don't have their formal approval yet, but MDOT has indicated that the proposed access point is actually meets all their standards. We don't have an official approval yet, but that's something that they think is appropriate. Then, just to reiterate the screening, the zoning ordinance also requires screening along any property line with residential, commercial, or office use. Right now, there's a wood stockade fence along the east property line with the legacy house on Ford Road. The planning commission can determine if that stockade fence is appropriate or if you would prefer a masonry fence. But that legacy house is actually a mixed-use building now. There's an office on the ground floor of the house and an apartment on the second floor. That's why the property owner there has been clear-cutting the site and has been occupying that as an office. And then with regards to the sound level, that is a concern. Technically, there's graphics shown on the site plan of where the ordering station might be, but it's not labeled. So we would like detailed cut sheets from the manufacturer for the ordering station to make sure the light levels from the ordering station and the sound levels do not violate ordinance requirements for decibels or for light levels. So those are the issues. For the planning commission, you can either choose to have these done administratively under your direction from your motion tonight, or you can choose to have the applicants provide you with a revised plan at a future meeting to address these issues.
Okay, well, let's go through them and see whether we can hash some of this out tonight or if we need a complete revised plan for it.
Before we do that, Frank, could I ask a quick question?
What's that?
You talked about a sidewalk on Crowder. Currently, there's sidewalks that run down Central on the east side of the street, all the way, partially on the commercial, more commercial side, but all the way down to Maplewood. Will they be required to have a sidewalk on their west side of their building? Contiguous Ford Road,
Yes.
Crowder, all the way?
Yeah, they're supposed to. I thought, isn't there one right now?
That was already noted, I think.
Well, on Crowder, but, I'm sorry, Central, on the central side, will they be required to have a,
Definitely. I thought there already was a sidewalk on Central, though.
is it gonna be part of the plan, though?
Yeah, it's shown on the plan.
Okay,
Yeah. Yep.
that's it.
Yeah, they have to maintain the central sidewalk in addition to providing the Crowder one.
Okay,
And they would be maintaining it too, so they would make sure.
all right.
Okay, and next on the agenda is presentation by the applicant. Do you wish to comment now, or do you want to wait till we go through the items one by one that we had, and we can discuss it then?
We can do either. I guess, aside from the building, which I'll defer to her, all the other site comments, we feel comfortable being addressable. I'll just say that right up front, so we can certainly discuss details. There are certain things that he mentioned that do require, I think, your specific approval, like on the screening fence and things of that sort. We can talk about in detail. We can do a brief overview, kind of going through those a little bit if you want. It's, like I said, we can be as detailed or brief as you want us to be.
Well, it's up to you whether you want to do this now. We have public comments coming up, and then planning commission discussion, and during the discussion, we'll go through each of the items listed in the site plan review separately, and possibly we could talk about that at that time.
Okay. I mean,
Does that work for you?
I can go through a brief, just do a very brief preemptive kind of. skip
If you
through
wish,
those,
go ahead.
And maybe that will save some questions down the road.
Okay.
And then we can do the building a little bit too. start from here and go backwards. As Mario pointed out, we did have communication with DOT on the drive location. They provided us conceptual approval. One of their criteria as part of their formal approval is that there's going to be a study regarding the stacking spaces and the likelihood that it might back up more or less. The stacking spaces that wrap around the building are per ordinance, I think, and actually a little bit more than that. But they will require us to see from the traffic standards if that will work. The intent is that primary flow will come in from Ford Road and either come out Ford Road or go out that way. We recognize that this entrance over here, again, being maybe similar to the McDonald's, that we can put a divider in there, a physical divider, so that people don't cheat and come in out of that direction. That shown kind of a light gray is that existing stand of trees that are there now. Those are intended to be maintained. We can embellish that with the landscaping that he mentioned. The sidewalk that doesn't exist here can be added. We talked a little bit about the sidewalk connection from Ford Road. We're looking at doing something on the east side of the driveway as a connection, and then utilizing the handicap crossing as our crossing into the main entrance. An alternative would be on the west side. On other projects, there can be a little bit of a concern about additional vehicular traffic, so this might be a little bit safer route, and we can adjust the landscaping around there to address that.
Where is the entrance on that side?
On this particular plan, there's an entrance here and there's an entrance here. This entrance can be rotated 90 degrees, actually. I'll probably defer to her on talking about that specifically, but that would be one avenue to address the front door issue.
Yeah.
Is this to rotate that so that you can see
More,
that.
more towards the east side of the front?
The west corner, I guess, of that front would be the front door. So, yeah, the west.
Okay,
If you're facing it, the left-hand side.
yeah.
What is the item to the upper right corner of the area there? It shows two small squares and a large square. Is that your dumpster enclosure?
Oh, this is the dumpster enclosure, correct.
Okay, what is it showing inside the enclosure there? Generally, we see one large dumpster. It looks like you have a multitude
Well,
of...
it could be.
That one, I think, shows like a garbage dumpster and then recycling.
Okay.
Okay.
They're also required, if they have, depending on their method of grease storage, so if they have a separate container that gets done, that's supposed to be inside an enclosure.
Yeah, I think that's actually gonna be a tank.
Yeah, and then the other alternative is a tank in the ground, which is
Yeah.
which actually much more preferred, but.
So there, and I believe that's over in this, buried under, in this area. We have underground storm detention underneath the pavement over here, which shows up more on the utility plan, not on the site plan here.
Yeah.
But on your utility sheet, it shows it a little bit more.
Have you gotten approval by the county for that? Have you talked to the county about that?
No, this is, my understanding is we're not there yet. They would next go to the city engineer. I have had some conversations with them, but that we have not gotten any formal reviews from that yet.
Okay.
I believe that's the next step. But we did, I guess the design is per, city and Wayne County standards. We haven't anticipated that. And I, like I said, our conversations found out a formal review regarding that. The fence, there's, actually it's kind of a double fence that goes along this side. Right now, we're proposing that to be maintained. It's a pretty sizable fence. Actually, there's a number of existing trees that are kind of literally and figuratively interwoven into the fence. We'd like to just kind of keep that all existing, and maintain that. The decorative fence on the front, we'll add the columns, just like, I think very similar to what they have at McDonald's, we can add that, that's not an issue, that was, we just had shown, that's probably just an oversight on our part, apologize. But we can certainly do that. The ordering menu is shown here. We can certainly provide more information in terms of the electronics, that's been requested on that.
Yeah, we need to know about the sound
Do you
system.
want to talk about the building, or was there any site-specific questions that, other than the building, that
Yeah,
nice, that I'm over, that I missed?
yeah, we haven't allowed stockade fence in the past, for abutting properties. We generally require masonry walls because the stockade fences don't.
Since this is
Okay.
considered a mixed use now, would it even require a screening wall?
That's a good question, because I was kind of taken aback that I think the zoning ordinance does say other commercial property, doesn't actually speak to mixed use. I'll look at that standard specifically again, but you're right, normally we require the masonry wall between commercial and residentially zoned property, and then this standard was saying office as
But
well.
this isn't residentially owned, or zoned.
Right, correct, it's no longer originally, it's zoned central business district,
Right.
and it's the existing fence, and I'm not sure who owns the fence, if you guys own the fence, or if actually the property owner to the east owns the
I
fence.
think, so there's actually kind of two fences there. I think one fence is owned by to the east, and one fence is on this property. So I guess
You each have one, huh?
Who built it, I guess I
Yeah.
guess that would remain to be seen, but in terms of where the property line is, it kind of goes right down the middle.
Okay.
So, also, is there a detail here that I didn't look at yet for the dumpster enclosure?
There
Yeah, there is.
should be
There is
on
one.
it might be, the very back,
Okay.
on the last
Does
sheet.
it show bollards? We require bollards with the dumpster
Yeah, there
enclosure?
should be.
I think so,
There should be
yeah.
part of the standard detail.
I think they,
Okay,
I think he's got it on that sheet there.
mhm.
Well,
okay.
there's one, there might be, the one that you need to look at, if that's not crossed out properly, is the one that's on the site plan sheet, not on the architectural.
Oh,
If there was a discrepancy, I apologize. So that would be on the site plan sheet, so look at maybe one or two more. That shows more detail. You see that on there?
No, it's the.
Oh, that's still architectural. Keep going.
and so, tomorrow,
Actually, I'm sorry.
would we still be looking at a masonry wall on Crowder that does abut R1 to the north?
So the issue with that is that technically it doesn't abut R1, it's, because it's property line to property line when we require the masonry wall. We have the street there. So I'm not sure, and then the other issue with the walls, if we did require the wall, it might require the removal of the trees. So that's kind of.
Well, it would depend on where the wall was put.
Depends where you put it, true.
Yeah, it could be inside of where the trees are.
Yeah,
Doesn't have to be right at the edge of the lot.
right. And with the wall requirement, typically, well, not typically, the ordinance does say, allow the planning commission to work with the adjacent property owner when it's adjacent to consider what kind of screening. Obviously, everybody prefers a screening wall because it's most effective. But, in this case, maybe a shorter screening wall might work, I don't know. Because in terms of like a 42-inch high screening wall in terms of headlights, but nowadays, I don't know, maybe you do need a tall one with the trucks we have.
Yeah, 4 foot might be a little better considering the height of a lot of vehicles.
Yeah.
But, okay,
And sorry, to answer your question, Mike, on page 12 is the cross-section detail for the dumpster enclosure, and they do have bollards, both to the rear and in the front.
Yeah, the sheets in the front that are just a single number, not the A sheets.
What is your, what are your doors made out of? Steel tube column, cane board?
They're actually, right now, they're a prefabricated, metal, steel, that they're actually a product that's intended for dumpster doors. It's not a stick-built or home-built thing. We've used them on a number of applications that they hold up a lot better than if you did them out of pressure-treated lumber or whatever. You see a lot of different ones, and they, particularly on the hinges, they fail after 3 months, and they're never replaced kind of thing. So we have gone to the more purpose-built that are designed for that abuse.
Okay.
I think the product name should be listed on there.
That sounds robust. What our minimum on that is usually a chain link fence that's laced with the material to make
Yeah,
it
I
more
guess
decorative but
I would
robust.
contend that this is better than that. That
Yeah.
it would pull up actually a little better than that.
It would, and be better.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Did you have any other?
If you want to go through the building stuff,
Sure.
we can kind of touch on that as well.
Yeah, so this is our proposed elevation. As mentioned before, we do have a door on one side and another one on the other side. It won't be an issue to rotate this door and just put it here in the front. I think, I don't have the exact percentage, but, so all of the back of the building is brick. This half lower part of the building and those plates is brick. All of those bricks. I think we should be very close to that 75%. If not, we'll adjust it to meet that requirement.
The only thing that might impact that is your red accent wall, because on each because with 75% on each elevation, and most importantly, the front,
75 on each side?
yeah, on each
Okay,
side.
got it. Yeah, we will.
And you can get red brick.
Right.
I mean, if you want to use red accent brick, that might be an issue or a way to solve the problem if it comes to that.
Okay. And then, as far as the colors, I
Yeah,
mean,
it's up.
this is what we're proposing.
Yeah, well, we'll have to discuss that. See if we think it's compatible with the existing businesses. But when we get a chance to talk about that a little later, we'll discuss it.
Wally's got his signs up. I'd like to ask where he would interface the sidewalk on the east side of the property through your ADA compliant area there. How would you do that? Would you just bring it through the crosshatched area?
Yeah, we need to look at that a little bit more, but that would be, I guess, the intent and the concern would be making sure that you have a very obvious cross-section.
Sure.
And give vehicles time to react if they're pulling in. We don't want to have it too close.
No,
to
it's
the-
very close
to
as
the-
it
to
shows
the
now.
public. Yeah, to the public sidewalk. I mean, the public sidewalk on Ford Road, it is what it is. But in terms of having people go right into the driveway entrance or coming out of it, we want to have that set back a little bit. That sidewalk would, I guess, right now would be butting up right next to the back of curb, and it would run along that, perhaps like 5 foot wide, and then would be integrated into that. We might reconfigure that accessible parking space or spaces a little bit so that crosshatched area might come a little bit further to the south, but
Okay.
or maybe not as angled. I guess maybe it's a little bit pivoted, but that's we'll need to kind of look at that a little bit more closely. What that would be, I guess my first intent would be to try to work something out in that regard, as opposed to on the west side, where there might be more conflicts with people exiting.
As it exists on the drawing here, what are we looking at distance-wise between the sidewalk and your ADA, your first handicap parking spot? What is that approximate distance there? I'm looking at the graphics here.
Probably about 50 feet approximately. On the site plan, there's some dimensions from the property line, and then adding a few more feet that's to the drive aisle there. So that's where
Okay.
Anyone else have a question for the applicant?
Good question. There's going to be an entrance on the front of the building?
Yeah, we do have an entrance on. We're
The
moving,
very
we're moving one door
front
around to the
face.
front.
Yeah.
Front face of the building?
Yeah.
It's not-
it would be. Yeah, it doesn't show on that one. That was part of the comments.
But we,
But we would be proposing to rotate the one that's facing west, to rotate that to the south. That would be on the left-hand side as you're facing the building.
So the access, the proposed access to the front door, that's not marked on the front of the building yet. So we are assuming what, you'll be cutting across the egress lane on the counterclockwise rotation, or is this going to be hooked into the handicapped, as you had mentioned?
Yeah, there'd be a sidewalk that would go across the front. So if you were exiting out of that, or entering from that one, you would walk across on the sidewalk parallel to the drive lanes, and then you could access.
And you'll be able
the
to go
crosswalk.
straight in and not be cutting it, okay?
Yes. And then I think with the landscaping and the fencing on the opposite side of drive lanes, that would probably discourage people from trying to cut across there, because then they'd run into the fence, so.
Are we in agreement on the 48-inch height at least for the wall?
well, I
across the
think,
back?
I don't, we can revisit that when we get into our discussion after it becomes our turn. But if there's no other questions for the applicant, let's move on. The, are there any other public comments or questions about the applicant's proposal with the site plan? Anything that hasn't come up yet? Yes.
John Murray again. First question I have is this going to be a franchise or an individual owner? And the reason I'm asking is as an individual owner, I think we have a better chance than a franchise, because if it doesn't take off, corporate could abandon it, and we end up with a problem. The next question, I looked at the plan view, and I really did not see a route of making deliveries. And I asked the question because at Papa John's, it's up there at Ford and Arcola, they have their big trucks sitting on Arcola and unloading, which creates a traffic issue, plus I question the weight of the trucks on our residential roads. And also, I noticed there they have a retention piping for the stormwater off the parking. I'm more or less asking, because I don't know, is that like a holding spot so it could trickle into our system? Or exactly how does that happen? Because my concern is we have yet to address the flooding and such in this town.
Well, that's what that's for, sir.
Right, and I'm just wondering, are we making sure we're covered here by what he
Well,
has?
it's kind of county controlled. They review it and decide if it meets their specifications. So we don't review it. The city doesn't. It's a county function.
And like
But
I've
it
said,
does
you-
meter the water out.
Right,
in
but like
answer.
I've said you
But
guys
that's-
before, I
that's
thank
the
you for
idea
the
of the whole
knowledge,
thing.
because I don't know. And it's just something we're all concerned of what's gonna happen. And it seems like we have a typical answer, it's the county. Thank you.
And just to let you know too, the county actually adopted higher standards for stormwater, and as a new construction, they have to do it. So they're gonna do underground storage tanks, and then they're only being allowed to release water, less than the agricultural rate even. So the new standards and new developments are intended to try and, to at least deal with the rainwater that falls on their on their land.
And I'm saying that it'd probably be nice if we put that out in the public, because a lot of us are still very concerned about our flooding issue in this town.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Elizabeth Roberts again. In regards to the barrier at the back of the property, you were talking about either a hedge fence. If it's a hedge fence, is it going to be an evergreen one? Will it stay green all year? Will the protection be there all year? Because if you use an indigenous one that sheds its leaves, then come fall and winter, those headlights will be hitting my house the entire time. And 36 inches barely makes a pickup truck's headlights. And then some of those pickup trucks are even higher than that. So how high are we talking? Who's going to maintain those shrubs, and how quickly will the dead ones be replaced? Just questions.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Robert Gonzalez, live on Beechwood. I only had a question, whether it's required or not, as the client's representative was giving the presentation, it only seemed appropriate that we had a copy so we could follow along. He was presenting this to you, and we could not, I know the gentleman here was able to look at it, but we didn't have a copy to follow along to encourage public comment. So we kind of just were listening to what the words were being said, but didn't really understand, as he was pointing to whatever he was talking about, what were we actually talking about. So whether it's required or not, in the future, it would be nice to have a copy of the site plan or any of the information, so the potentially impacted residents could also, be part of the presentation. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else have a comment? Okay. Moving along from public comments, then we'll go to the Planning Commission discussion. Let's take it item by item, make sure we cover everything. Okay, starting A, we don't seem to have an issue with A. B, building design requirements. Okay. Entry door on the front facade. The applicant has agreed to move a door to the front facade, so I believe that is taken care of. Verification on the actual plan, possibly we can handle that administratively in your office? Okay. Anyone have a comment on any of these items, just speak up. Building materials, okay, we're looking at a minimum of 75% wall area be comprised of brick. You believe that your building already, your design has a 75%, who will actually compute the amount of brick on the building to decide?
Well, they will provide, I'm requesting they provide revised elevations with their calculations, and then as long as it's dimensioned and scaled correctly, I will just verify that the calculations are correct in terms of area for each elevation has the, so measuring the total area of the walls and then making sure that 75% of those materials are brick.
Okay, and, yes,
How does that calculation include, like, the glass?
It's exclusive of doors and glazing, so it does not include so it's not the entire elevation, it's the wall materials. The wall materials have to be 75% brick.
Thank you.
okay, we have agreement on that. Building colors, now we need to take a look at the building colors. Any feelings about their colors in comparison with the adjacent? When I was there looking around at some of the adjacent properties, I looked across the street and we had New Peking Restaurant, which is red and white. We had other buildings that were pretty much all brick, brown in color.
Yeah.
We had the building on the west side is brick with large concrete panels that used to be windows. So you know, there's a variety of,
I didn't see a theme either.
you know, there's, yeah, it's hard to find a theme, but do we feel that this is compatible with what we see in the neighborhood, especially with the large area of red?
I'm fine with it.
I'm okay with it. We don't have a prevailing color pattern. On the other side of Middle Belt, we somewhat do. On this side of Middle Belt, we don't. We have the existing color that Taco Bell and the Allstate office and,
Well, we can kind of look at the overall downtown area too, the central business district as a whole, to see if it fits in with the prevailing look, if it's compatible. Doesn't have to be exactly the same, but is it compatible?
I don't think it's an exception.
Pardon me?
I don't think we're making an exception.
No?
it'll stand out certainly, but I don't think in a garish way. I think there's enough other building material there that the red will be muted somewhat.
The color won't be a
So-
good idea.
Yeah, I'm okay with it.
Eric,
No, good, yeah.
you're okay with, you think it's
Yeah, I
compatible
don't see how
enough?
it's clashing, it's not really clashing with anything around it, so.
Okay, then, all right, then I guess we've decided that it
can mark
is,
off
it
three.
is compatible.
Okay?
Okay, site access and circulation.
I would,
The applicant has agreed to put in a raised curb design at the entrance off of Central with signage, am I correct?
Yes.
Okay,
can
so,
signage be illuminated?
well,
Is-
I mean,
To make sure nobody could miss it, and nobody drives into your signage in the first week you open.
I guess it would be, we'd certainly be following your sign ordinance, so as long as that is all compatible, then we can do that.
Yeah, I think it might be based on where the sign is located. If it's in the driveway curb cut approach, then it'd have to follow directional signage requirements. So maybe the only thing I would suggest is be highly reflective material.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
fine.
because, lighting would kind of be hit or miss, I think.
Okay.
But definitely making it highly reflective material, I think, will make sure
Something,
people.
With enough elevation, not down on the ground.
Right, absolutely. Oh, yeah, no, not.
So it's within people's sight line and it's obvious to them.
And I
Because we
I
have
would
another
think,
location we talked of earlier, not far from this area, and it's none of the above. There's no curb.
Yeah, I think, well, to his point, I think it's, signage only gets you so far. I think having a curved physical,
Yeah.
more of a triangular shaped thing, that's probably gonna be the most effective beyond any signage.
and I really think bollards, whether they be a standard steel bollard or whether they actually be, they have these collapsible, very bright orange bollards that actually anchor to the ground, that if they get hit, they get hit, but,
like
they're skinny
bicycle
ones.
lanes used.
Kind of, yeah, like the
Yeah.
bicycle lane ones.
Okay,
So it might be a thing that you might see evolve over time, depending on
well,
the,
yeah.
the driving skills of the visitors to the site, unfortunately.
If people are gonna drive over curbs, I guess, it's hard to stop them, but,
yeah.
Well, that's why I prefer the steel bollard, but,
yeah,
yeah, I don't know,
they're less likely to drive into that,
right, yeah.
but
You
So
would
if we-
prefer a bollard over a curb? Is that-
A
No.
curb with a bollard on top of it.
both, bollard in the middle of it.
I was just, I guess if we have signage there, and if they're gonna.
I can send you,
Then you're probably-
there's a site around that I've seen with it, I'll send you a
Okay.
picture.
Yeah, you can send,
Yeah,
send what you're thinking, that'd be helpful.
It sounds like we're pretty much in agreement on that issue,
Okay.
but,
Correct. No, they're correct. So like, the next issue they're gonna talk about is the truck turning movement plan, so we will need that. So based on the radii and all those kind of things, you'll have to make both things work.
Yes.
And yeah, definitely, the intent is to make entering vehicles go to the right, but the exit could be wide, if you gotta widen it to make the turning radii work for trucks, you know, whatever you need to do.
I don't anticipate an issue with that, I guess putting the discussion about the loading space, but I think the idea would be that they come in from Ford Road and then exit out Central, and that would be free, and then they would be parking and unloading as we proposed in the drive-through lane when there wouldn't, you know, would be at off hours, so that there wouldn't be that conflict. That seems to be a fairly common way for a lot of the fast food restaurants to do that, and then you're not dedicating a whole extra space for something that's not used all the time.
So,
Do you think we need to incorporate, because Ford Road has ingress and egress, do you think we need to incorporate a no left turn sign at that point? Or just leave it up to the city down the road if it becomes an
well, it's
accident-prone?
not near the corner like
Right,
the
McDonald's.
other one is,
yeah.
and people are already making left turns out of Central. But
Yeah. How about the ingress and egress driveway?
the one on Central?
No, the one on
Or that
Ford
one on
Road.
Ford, that's what I mean. I don't think we need to
Okay,
do it.
okay.
I think,
It-
you know, just the heavy traffic's gonna make it difficult for people to make left turns there.
Yeah. I mean, it stacks up all the way back to that area during rush hour,
Oh,
every day of the week.
yeah, past that.
Past that, almost to the driveway for
Going west, you're talking about?
going east.
Yeah, heading west
Yeah, heading west, the traffic, it'll back up all the way to that driveway.
from the light.
So making a left out of Ford Road from your business will at best be difficult. On many days, it'll be
Yeah, I don't know,
impossible.
I think if the police department decides that it's a
Yeah,
safety
okay,
issue,
we'll leave it
then
up
they
to
can
them. Yeah,
issue an order.
I was looking to be preemptive, but we'll leave it open.
Okay, and we were talking about the truck maneuvering plan. You're going to provide that? to-
Yes.
Okay. And the,
So that can be a Mario?
yeah, well, actually, I think confirming all of this is going to be Mario, is what I would suggest. Either that or we have to wait till another month for him to bring in a new plan. So I think
I'm
that's-
just circling the things that we have to highlight with him when we make the recommendation, yay or nay. Okay.
Okay, and what were you proposing again for the loading zone?
Basically doing a kind of doubling up where the truck could park in the drive-through lane on the east, kind of the northeast corner of the building where there would be the door to go back into for stocking, and it would pull into there to unload, load it, early in the morning.
Is that gonna be,
hours.
is the restaurant going to be closed during that period, or?
We usually, so deliveries are usually done Tuesdays and Fridays, and they have given us a time frame between 6 in the morning to 10 in the morning, and it's just somewhere in between. I can tell you that in Grand Rapids, we have 3 locations, and they have been delivery like 6 in the morning, and that's before we open the store. But it's hard for me to tell you exactly what time they will be coming.
But it'll be a light business period at least, yeah. Is everybody satisfied with that loading plan?
With one question, are you using full-size semis for your delivery or the?
No, they're smaller trucks.
So when you do your review of your turning radiuses and stuff, you just want to make sure that they can get off your site without tearing things up, driving over curbs or landscaped areas.
But then just to make sure that the key then, probably the largest vehicle visiting the site would be possibly fire trucks. So their plan will make sure the fire
Yeah.
trucks have their.
Okay.
Yeah, we need to be able to have turning radius for the
Yeah.
fire trucks.
All right.
We have actually vehicle tracking software, it's a part of the program, so that we're not just drawing templates in a vacuum. It actually does take into account we plug in the actual length of the truck, if it's a semi-truck, cab, ladder, fire truck, those types of things, and then it will tell us if it works or doesn't work. And
Okay,
we keep
good.
going through it until it works, so.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, now screening. We have the fence on the east side, and this is a screening wall that wouldn't be required, I don't believe, if it wasn't there already. So I don't think it's necessary to put
To the
a
east,
masonry, to the east.
I don't either. I'm just concerned about the south and,
Yeah,
I
well,
mean, the north and,
the north side is a different situation, and I think we need something possibly 4 feet high
I'm,
to cut down on headlights blaring on the homes across the street.
I'd like to see the 48, and I'd like to see irrigated landscaping on the north side of it, so that it's not quite so garish to the R1 residents.
Well, it will be on the inside of all the trees on the street, so we already have some screening there
Some breakup of it.
to break it up. I think,
Those are current,
Yeah,
so we just
Yeah.
close that parking lot.
do we think that some kind of landscaping would be adequate, or do we think a
Well, let's ask the-
masonry wall?
let's ask the people that will
Because
be looking.
technically, it's not, according to you, I believe, you said it's not required,
Because it's not directly
because
adjacent.
it's not adjacent?
Yeah, the street breaks it
Yeah,
up.
in one section where it comes to the actual fast food drive-through requirements, it says, provided along all property lines abutting property, so
Okay,
directly
so
adjacent.
this-
But then we have our walls and screening standards that do allow for flexibility and changes to the standards. But that usually the standards envision either the 6-foot masonry wall abutting or landscaping. I think in this case, especially because it's a special use, and especially because there's single family on the other side, what you're proposing would be appropriate, because the special land use, the whole intent is gonna have vehicles turning there with their headlights. So to minimize those headlights, it does seem appropriate. And the ordinance does allow you the flexibility to require a 48-inch.
Yeah, I really believe the best option would be a 48-inch masonry screen wall set inside the tree line along Crowder. Are you good with that, or?
So perhaps on the, maybe 2 or 3 feet north of the back of the curb from the parking area, and then that would, that should not interfere with the existing vegetation. I think it
Yep.
would be good to try to maintain that as a denser screen as well. So
Yeah,
I think that wouldn't interfere with that, if that's acceptable.
I agree.
I'd like to ask a question to the homeowners in the immediate area. You have the trees there and a 48-inch screening wall, which would be somewhat decorative. Can it be like a split-face block or precast panels that mimic brick or something other than just plain cinder block? With that idea in mind and the trees that are already there that will be saved during construction and afterwards, do you think that screening would look pleasant on that street?
Are they going to put anything in front of the trees? Are they going to?
There'll be a sidewalk, there'll be trees, and there'll be a
So is the sidewalk gonna come in front of the trees?
Yes.
Because the sidewalk further down the street would
in
only-
front meaning closer to Ford Road.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, closer to us, Crowder, because it's on the back of the
Yeah.
property.
Sidewalk would be closer to you, and then the trees, and then the wall.
So-
My concern was that vegetation plants, sometimes if we have a dry season, they can die if they're not watered. I mean,
Right, right.
I much would rather have a wall or something that, in case that happens.
Well-
And it's also a barrier, sound barrier.
As I understand it, it's sidewalk, trees, wall, 48-inch out of some sort of a decorative material. They make precast panels that drop into columns. They make concrete forms that mimic brick and a number of different things like that.
Masonry of
So
Yes.
you think the trees would be sufficient to break that wall up a little bit? So it's not just a,
The trees are getting old, they take hard breaking and falling
Yeah,
down.
we've had a couple of them
The
fall.
winds have taken some out, so that's my concern is that we don't depend on those to be the barrier, so yes.
well, we can ask them to review the tree structure and trim as necessary so we don't have dead branches falling. Eventually, it will probably happen, but not today or tomorrow anyhow. Review the trees and see if some pruning or trimming might be necessary.
Okay.
Couple questions on
Yes.
that. So if we put a screening wall, are we gonna be required to do more landscaping or just leave what is there?
No, it's what's there.
No, that's what we just talked about. The decorative, a wall of some sort of a decorative material rather than plain cinder block, and then the trees will break that up nicely.
I just wanna make sure I got that right. And then the second question that I have is with that sidewalk, what's the purpose of the sidewalk? Because right now, there's no sidewalk there and it doesn't go, it won't
This-
go anywhere and there's no access
So
with
the,
that wall.
So the sidewalk will be located, it'll be the travel lane of Crowder, the curb, a little bit of grass, and then the sidewalk, and then the trees. The city has an ordinance that requires all property that has a new use or a change of ownership or a change in rental status to put in a sidewalk that is missing. It's a citywide program to make sure that we have a pedestrian sidewalk system throughout the city. So while there won't be a sidewalk currently to your east, eventually that property owner will have to make that connection. Because the intent is to make sidewalk connections everywhere, so that at least when the high schoolers are walking, they're supposed to walk on the sidewalk. And now we can tell them, there is your sidewalk, go walk there. So,
And do you need, there won't be a need to have an access through that
no,
screening?
not from Crowder, no.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Next, landscaping, method of irrigation. What are you proposing for irrigating your landscaping?
It's an in-ground
In-
irrigation system.
Okay,
Is there gonna be an irrigation system on the other side of the wall for the trees, or anything else they can put, like if there's grass there now, they're not gonna rip up all the grass, are they gonna put something over there? Cause there is grass.
There's
there will
grass now,
still,
and there's-
there will still be grass.
Yeah, so are they gonna have an irrigation for the grass?
I think the irrigation is meant for the landscaping that they're adding,
Okay,
yeah.
But they are required to maintain all landscaping on site, so,
Yeah, they have to cut the grass and, you know,
yeah.
and maintain it and make sure it doesn't die and that sort of thing.
Are we gonna address the knee wall on Ford in a different area?
oh, well, that was talked about before. The wall on Ford and Central, that's going to be a combination of brick
Brick pillars.
post with wrought iron in between.
Yeah, we'll add that detail, it'll be similar to, I think, what's at McDonald's right now.
Okay, great.
And then further down, there are different applications of it. If you look at the former Kmart site that's further to the west, it's a knee wall with a limestone cap on it. So there's two different variations you can go to. You can go with the brick wall with a cap, or you can go with the columns with the wrought iron in between. So you have some flexibility in the design there.
Okay, getting back to the landscaping, there's a note talking about some of the landscaping needing to be moved because it impedes vision. Have you discussed
We can make
those
adjustments. We'll
changes?
probably show a vision triangle so that we can communicate that whether it works or not.
Okay,
And we'll make the adjustments on the landscaping accordingly.
Plus
Very-
the modification for the entries, the sidewalk to the front of the building, the landscape that would have to be modified.
yeah, there's gonna have to be modifications for the new sidewalk at the front entrance. Yeah,
Yeah, so
Is this gonna,
he had already mentioned about moving some of the Atlantic crabapple a little bit to the north and to the east, and then that would accommodate the sidewalk as well.
very good. Okay, trash dumpster, I think we already talked about that, that's good. Lighting, there's some fixtures that are being suggested to be modified. Have you discussed that with them?
Yeah, I believe they were okay with
We'll
that.
make those adjustments.
Okay.
Yep.
And do you already have the photometric plan?
No, they'll modify it once they do the.
Once they do that, they'll
those changes.
modify the plan? Okay. The photometric plan for the rest of you tells us that their lighting won't spread off-site to shine bright lights in your windows, so that's what that's for. Sidewalks, we've talked about that, must be revised to provide pedestrian connection from Ford Road to the entry door on the front facade, and a sidewalk provided along Crowder Avenue. And we're good with that. Minimum frontage. Okay, we're a little short on the Ford Road frontage. We couldn't make the frontage on Central, could we?
I wish. Actually,
Two front yards.
that is true.
What's
It's
the
a good
current
point.
address of the property? That's what
The
dictates.
current address is probably on Ford Road.
On Ford Road, but at the same time,
That can be changed.
it can be changed just by the city. You're okay with the Central Road
I thought that was.
address, we might be able to do that.
Will that address the board being undecided?
I see what you did there.
I think that specifically talks about Fort Road, but it doesn't.
Yeah. It actually
I
does.
don't think the variance is gonna be a big issue.
I don't think
For
so.
4.5 feet or whatever it is.
We'll look at that possibility of changing it to central as frontage, and if that's the case, then the variance won't be necessary, but if we can't do that, then they'll just have to go to the ZBA in September.
I think the ZBA is probably the best option for that.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, we have to get a variance for the zoning board from the zoning board of appeals from that standard for the 5 feet or however much it is deficient. Screening, we've already discussed. Control of sound level, you're going to provide information on the engineering for the sound level controls for the ordering, the menu station. Okay,
We can provide that, and too, I think we have that screening wall, that also will provide some.
yeah, well, it's not, it'll provide a little bit, yeah, definitely, especially from the traffic. But since it's only 4 foot high, it won't completely do the job. Okay, stacking spaces, we have 11, which is one more than we require, I believe.
Yes.
All right. Well, are there any other questions or comments from the commission?
It looks like we covered everything.
I think so.
Mario can handle all this except for the variance?
Yes, well, we can include the fact that they are required to have a variance in order to make up for the deficiency in the frontage. We can include that in our approval.
Yes.
We need a motion to approve based on recommendations made by McKenna and Associates.
I make a recommendation to approve with all the items that we spoke of. Mario is going to review as necessary, and that there needs to be,
After the new documentation is provided, you will administratively approve it based on our discussion.
Correct.
and that ZBA needs and that they need a zoning variance from ZBA for the minimum frontage number.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Can you read that back?
Yep. Do you want me to read back to you all the bullet points I got just to make sure we've got everything? Or do you want to go off the findings of fact, in the
Just go
McKenna
with it.
letter?
Yeah, I don't think we need to reread the whole thing.
Okay, so then this is going to be a motion to approve site plan approval based upon the findings of fact in the McKenna and Associates letter and contingent upon applicant receiving a variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals for the minimum frontage standard.
Correct.
Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, take the roll.
Commissioner Steenberg?
Aye.
Commissioner Walls?
Aye.
Commissioner King?
Aye.
Commissioner Turnbull?
Aye.
Chairperson May?
Aye. Okay, your site plan is approved based with these changes and modifications, and you'll contact Mario to get him the updates, and he'll handle the final approval administratively when you get that to him.
Work with Mario, and good luck on your business. And you think you'll be able to break ground before the snow flies? Okay.
We're excited to have you. Okay. Next item is zoning ordinance amendment. This is the public hearing on proposed amendment language regarding the establishment of adult-use marijuana facilities in the M1 Light Industrial District. Purpose of the public hearing is to allow the public to make comment on the changes as they wish. So we'll start out with the presentation of the consultant's report.
Yes. City administration was directed to craft ordinance amendments to allow for the possibility of adult use marijuana facilities within the city. The leadership contracted with an attorney, and they drafted ordinance amendment that would be two ordinance amendments. One is the zoning ordinance amendment, which lists where and what type of adult use marijuana facilities would be allowed in the city. And then separately, a general city ordinance standard that goes over the application, licensing, and business practices or standards process for these adult use marijuana. And just the reason I'm calling it adult use marijuana is that's the official term utilized by the Cannabis Regulatory Agency, or the CRA. But it's colloquially known as, recreational marijuana. They're regulated under the MRTMA, the Michigan Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Authority Act. And the ordinance before you tonight is the zoning ordinance. As the planning commission, you have the authority to hold the public hearing and to consider any proposed amendments to the zoning ordinance that allow the change for the type of uses permitted in the city. You would be making, at some point, a recommendation to city council on this proposed draft, and then city council will consider whether or not to adopt the changes to the zoning ordinance. Then city council will be on their own, because they regulate they have the authority on all other ordinances, the general law ordinances of the city. They will be taking up the questions of the draft language for licensing, business practices, and the application process separately. That's chapter 124 ordinance amendments. You're dealing with the zoning ordinance amendments. Currently, the city does allow for medical marijuana facilities under the MMFLA. That's the Michigan Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act. We have gone through, and we have 3 facilities that have been approved by the Planning Commission to operate, one that has just recently obtained their C of O, and 2 others that are in the building permit review process. This language that's before you and subject to public review tonight is proposing to allow for a similar strategy for adult use marijuana, similar to the medical marijuana. The adult use facilities are envisioned or are proposed in this draft by the attorney to only be located in the M1 light industrial district. They would only be located in that district. They would also be required to have our co-location requirement. Actually, let me back up for a second. The zoning ordinance before you lists the type of uses that would be permitted. Under adult use, they're proposing to allow for adult use marijuana growers, adult use marijuana processors, and adult use marijuana retailers. There are other facilities that are permitted under the Act or as authorized by the CRA, such as safety compliance facilities, secure transporters, excess growers, cannabis establishments for consumption establishments, and event organizers. All of these other uses would not be permitted in the city. The ordinance before you specifically prohibits any other adult use marijuana facility except a grower, a processor, or a retailer of adult use marijuana. And similarly to our medical marijuana standards, this ordinance is proposing that a processor can only be located in the city if they co-locate with a grower in the same building in the same facility. And then if someone wants to be a retailer must co-locate with both a processor and a grower. So it's the same co-location requirement as our medical marijuana facilities. And then the highlight finally is that there are the same separation requirements for these facilities as we have for medical marijuana. They must be located 300 feet from any residentially zoned district measured from one lot line to the other. So it's not by the building, it's not by where it's located, it's the lot line of a residentially zoned piece of property to the lot line of a adult use marijuana facility must be 300 feet. Similarly, there must be 500 feet from a licensed child care facility, school, or religious institution from the lot line of a adult use marijuana facility. 500 feet from any public park to an adult use marijuana facility. And then we also have requirements that the lots themselves for adult use marijuana would have to be 250 feet from Ford Road. There have to be a 250 feet separation from Ford Road. And then also that the buildings that are occupying adult use marijuana would have to be 300 feet from Ford Road as well. So in effect, these are the same location requirements as the medical marijuana uses. They would be required to only be open at most from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And that's so while I highlighted the separation requirements, I wanted to do that because those indicate where these facilities would be located. And it's the same as medical marijuana. The zoning ordinance specifically only lists the types of uses that would be allowed. Once again, only allowing for growers, only allowing processors, only allowing retailers. All the other adult use facilities we prohibit, including any other facilities created by the CRA. The state law under the MRTMA allows the state agency to create new adult use facilities. They've done this, but our ordinance specifically says if CRA creates any new type of use, that would be prohibited as well in the city. So we do feel, and the ordinance before you in your packet has been tweaked a little by the administration, by the city clerk and myself, to shore up that language, to solidify that the only types of uses in the zoning ordinance that would be allowed to be a grower, processor, retailer. So those are the ordinances as crafted by the attorney. And I'm sure there are a lot of questions, but I can take any more at the appropriate time. I just want to point out the highlights of this particular process.
Okay. Next, we will open the public hearing. It's 8:12. If anyone wishes to speak on this ordinance?
Robert Gonzalez, Beechwood Avenue. So I know this is a controversial topic. The only thing I could really say on this matter is, there is I'm not sure how I feel about a growing facility, but there is a dispensary, which would be a retail, which is on Inningster, down Middle Belt and Cherry Hill.
Yep.
And my daughter has autism. My father had cancer, and those products seem to help as far as quality of life. My daughter, it helps her with anxiety and things of that nature. Of course, there's all the other uses out there that, whether there's one or not, you can't stop folks from using it. But I was in that facility, I think it's called Vibe down the road, and I was a little surprised at the diversity of the people that are going into those facilities, all ages, young and old, all for different reasons, many of them because of not necessarily having a medical card, because that costs money. And on top of that, you also have to purchase, the product you need to use. But I was a little surprised as to, it's almost like walking into, kind of like a grocery store. There's a big variety of different products that have different functions. So I would not be opposed. Again, I don't know how I feel about a growing facility, but as far as a retail facility, I would not be opposed to that, just because I think, one, I am pro-business, and so bringing businesses here that would benefit the community. I do have a lot of neighbors in my neighborhood that are ill or can't get to those facilities, but can use those products, and I happen to, along with my daughter, help them get those products. I myself go there, so I think it would be a good thing. Obviously, it would bring revenue to the city, and of course, I'm sure there's many controls, to monitor that type of a facility. But I do know they have them everywhere. I just like seeing, those dollars stay in the city, regardless of my opinion on how many more fast food joints we need in this town. But I do, I am in favor of that. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak on this item?
My only concern is we're talking about the distances from 153 Ford Road, 600 feet back, correct?
300 feet from Ford Road.
300 feet for a recreational sale.
Correct.
Okay, and off of Middle Belt, what would that be?
They,
That would be storefront?
Well, no, they're only allowed in the M1 industrial district, and the only place in the city that has the M1 industrial zoning is over in the northeast corner of Vinoy and Ford.
Okay.
So,
So we're hamstringing the people that are trying to start out, and it's easier for them to go somewhere else and give our tax dollars to other cities. I'm, pro-left, it doesn't matter to me. We voted on this, what is this, 8 years ago, 6 years ago? We wanted it here. Now we just keep pushing it back, pushing it back, pushing it back. 300 feet, 150 feet? Come on. There's bars at every corner. The church thing, separation church and state. That doesn't belong. Feelings are mutual, shut your doors. That's who I'm going with this, guys. We got a new mayor just because of this issue. Let's not pretend that's not why. Okay? Said my piece.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak on this?
First of all, I'd like to compliment you guys at the beginning of this where you designated the industrial area. I appreciated the fact that you opened it up for the medical. But there's a little problem with this medical. Do you realize that 18 to 21-year-old by a doctor's paper can get that product? And because of the opiate pandemic, we know we cannot trust the medical facilities. We have an issue over there where that big building, T-Rex, that's right off of there, the building is for sale. So does that mean we're gonna be losing another business in this area? We need to get the industrial park healthy because I've driven through there and it looks like a ghetto. Maybe with these 3 buildings, we can bring in other types of products that coexist with that. I also believe that because of what has happened in this area, you have Westland, Inkster, and other cities that have now allowed the adult use. I think they can use a Me Too clause to force our hand on this. So what I would suggest is you guys approve what you have, but let the council make the final decision when, why, and everything of when it happens. You guys have done a great job, and we need to continue to have progress in this town, and the cannabis is something that's happening. Over in Inkster, they had the flower bowl that was right next to the Melody. It was on a church. They have now moved to Inkster in Cherry Hill, and they've taken up a strip mall to create their business. We need to take also a look at Cherry Hill and Middle Belt where the Vibe's at and see what kind of crimes happen. Make sure that what we're looking at, we know what we're happening. If they're not having crime over there, that's one reason you can go about putting this in this town. And we do need the additional revenue. So you guys have done a great job, and I hope you can continue.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak on this item?
Good evening. Thank you for taking up the topic. My name is Craig Aronoff. I'm with Aronoff Law in Royal Oak, Michigan. I represent 2 of the 3 permit holders currently and helping them get their licenses. As Mario said, and thank you, Mario, for all your help through the process, of course. The one that's got the C of O or is about to have their C of O is going to be filing for a Step 2 license at the state very soon. Unfortunately, it's only medical, which is doing about last month, it was about $263 million in adult use sales in the state of Michigan and just under 7 in medical. So it's a dramatic difference for this kind of investment to not have a market to sell to or products available other than what you might purchase, because the SKUs available in medical are virtually none right now because every other community and every other area has gone over to the adult use side. And with that comes the tax revenue that comes from the excise tax. There's a 10% fee that's charged on every sale. It's on top of the sales tax. So if you bought $100 worth of marijuana, there's a 6% sales tax, and then another 10% on top of that that goes to this fund. That 25% of that goes back pro rata to all the communities that have stores, and another portion goes to the county. So there'd be a 3-store allocation under the current ordinance just for the 3 medicals if they were to get the adult use as well, which would, last year would have brought in $150,000 of added revenue. And that was what, it was $52,000 per store. It was $57,000 the year before that. And this would have been, if we had these up and running by September 1, you would have been eligible for this year's allocation. So by next year, you'll be included from the fiscal period at the end of October 1 to September 31. And so just wanted to say thank you for your consideration of it. We really hope that you allow for it. Our hope would be is that you just allow the medicals to have the rec and not bring any more in. Allow the ones you've already permitted that have made the investment, that are in the process of building out or already have built out, and let them earn back their investment and bring those jobs into the community that are consistent with those facilities. To the extent that there'll be more potentially available, we're hoping that, you know, with the buffers and everything, that it really would limit what would be available based upon the way that the math would work on all of that. But certainly we appreciate it. Hopefully you'll be making the recommendation and we'll be moving forward. And we thank you for your previous approvals of the build out and everything for the medical version. They spent a lot of money on it. We've done a lot of remediation to the one property so far. And there's a lot of money about to go into another one as soon as those permits are pulled. So thank you again. And I'm here if you have any other questions on the market or any of the rest of it. I've spent the last 7 years of my life 100% in the cannabis space. 20 years before that, I was doing business and transactional and securities work. So I moved my practice into this space. The regulatory environment is sound. The crime is low. Each one of these is going to have security and cameras. They're not really crimes of opportunity. They're actually more secure than many of the other businesses and banks and other places that have cash around the area, the 7-Elevens and whatnot that might be in that situation, or gas stations. So appreciating that these bring both jobs and that added level of security around them, you know, it does, you know, begin to find thriving areas. If you look at the other communities that have, you know, come in, we've talked about a couple of stores, but there's certainly a number of licensees throughout the state. We have not had a zombie apocalypse in any community yet as it relates to cannabis. But in reality, it's really brought good jobs into those communities as well as the added revenue from the retail. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak on this topic? Okay, seeing no one, we'll close the public hearing at about 8:23. Oh, thank you. Is there any written communications?
Oh, our office did not receive any written communications.
Okay. Then we will close the public hearing. Planning Commission discussion and recommendations. Anyone have any comment?
I had a couple questions. Mario, do you know the rationale for excluding these other businesses? They seem uncontroversial, so why would the ordinance include the exclusion of, say, a safety compliance facility?
I guess the only thing I can say to that would maybe just consistency with the medical, I guess. I don't know. I mean, one thing I know about safety compliance is that they don't need as many of them in the market as others. But you are correct. It's basically a lab. I have them in some of my other communities, and they're there to test the quality of the products from each of the growers to make sure that they're safe. They know the levels of pesticides, herbicides, chemicals are not above required limits. When it comes to micro business, that is a new topic that wasn't under MMFLA, so it's a new version of MRTMA. An A grower license is 500, I believe, 500, 1,500, and 2,000, I think is what the numbers are for A, B, and C. A micro business intended to be, I believe it's 150 to 500, I think.
It's 100 for Class A, 500 B, 2,000 for C, and then a micro business is either 150 or 300.
So the intent of the micro business was an attempt to allow for more of basically a mom and pop type situation that's not a facility that is run by some of the larger entities, because the larger entities have entered the market in Michigan and they are controlling a lot of the market. But, you know, from a zoning standpoint, we can't talk to like who the operators are, except with a micro business, it's the idea of a smaller operation run by someone that's wanted, like, I don't know if you'd call it boutique, but, you know, it's something like that. Almost, I guess the only thing I can think of is maybe it's like a microbrewery situation, possibly.
This is a growing market. Why would we would go out of our way to exclude things that, I'm just trying to understand if there's a legal ramification or something.
The only thing I would say to that, though, is that whenever it comes to crafting these ordinances, as I've done that in multiple communities, is that it's easy to start slowly and then turn it up.
Okay.
It's harder to, if you open up the doors, to close the doors, because the horses are already out. And then legally speaking, if you felt there was something that came wrong from some of the other uses, it's hard to close those doors. But it's definitely and that's been the entire intent and process behind starting with medical, because they wanted, the administration, it's been the thought to allow medical to come in, see how it works, see how it goes, if there's any negative impacts, and then consider expanding in the future. It's just that our current medical uses just haven't been up and running, just because of the reality, because of what's been going on in the market, so.
Yes.
And to that, haven't some of the other communities in Michigan discovered that by allowing all three of these items to exist in any C1 or C2, it has created a problem that they didn't anticipate with an explosion of stores in their commercial districts?
You know, I'm not.
It's not widespread, but I've read about a few communities where.
There in the beginning, when some of the facilities came in, there were definitely some communities that had a high concentration of operators, and because of the way they were operating, specifically, there was some negative connotations. But that's something that, you know, I think was more an issue of making sure that those facilities comply with the standards. And that was also at the beginning of the market. Now that the market has kind of opened up, I mean, it's been here a while. We don't see that kind of issue, but we see other issues. Just like any other business enterprise, you know, it ebbs and flows with ups and downs, and you see them in the newspaper articles where sometimes, you know, at first there was a shortage of marijuana from the growers, and now there's and so that's when they allowed caregivers to sell their marijuana to provisioning centers, when that wasn't the intent, but the state let them put the marijuana from provisioning centers into the retail space. But now it's the opposite side. Now the opposite side is, at the current point, there's there's an excessive amount of marijuana supposedly. So it's just like any business. It's finding its way, and it's determining its level to even out. Different investors coming in, that sort of thing.
I have one more follow-up.
Sure.
And I listened to a couple of the city council meetings where there was a lot of discussion around the number of licenses and litigation in the event that other interested parties are not able to get into that pool. Maybe I missed it, Mario. Is there a reference to the number of licenses in the ordinance?
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's a key point that I didn't actually point out. So under medical, we did specifically limit them to 3, and that was the approach of starting with C3 and see what happens. Because of litigation that has occurred in other communities, and just knowing what happens, this ordinance, as drafted by this attorney, is not proposing any restriction on the number of facilities in the city, only allowing for the buffers to create that limited area in which they could be located. So in this case, we will be having a map soon showing where they could potentially be located, and where they would go. But mainly you're looking at a portion of Industrial Road, a portion of Park Lane, and then a portion of Hubbard. So it's basically the same, in that same little quadrant in the interior of the M1 zoning district. But there is no limit on the number. So in theory, the industrial businesses that are on Park Lane, each of those individual ones, they do meet the setback requirements for residential from the residential and the school uses in Westland and distance from Ford Road in which they could be located. There are also 2 buildings on Industrial Drive that could be located, and some of the Initex buildings could be there.
So how are we thinking about, I'm just trying to play out the scenario, right, where this would move forward. We have another applicant, we have another applicant, we have another applicant.
We have had that.
Well, right, and so are we setting ourselves up for too much concentration? Is there anything we should be thinking about as far as
Are
speed
there
bumps?
also separation requirements between
So
businesses?
I will say that this ordinance drafted by the attorney does not include that. I have seen, and I've drafted other ordinances with those separations.
Doesn't the medical marijuana ordinance?
The original, one of the original versions of the medical marijuana did have that, but since that point in
You dropped
time, you dropped it out.
Oh.
But you kept the quantity at 3. So you specifically set it at 3. The issue now is that we have our 3 medical facilities, and if we were to limit it to 3, the attorneys don't know how that could be done in terms of keeping the city in a protected state that would minimize the possibility of any type of lawsuit from outside applicants. Because if the city did 3 total for adult use, and they were only for the existing medical, I'm not an attorney, so I don't know these things, but it's my understanding that because there's no case law to back that up, that could be a point of litigation for outside entities to say they didn't have an opportunity to come into the community.
So my only suggestion would be, and maybe others can weigh in on this, should we look at, okay, what is in the M1, and then with all of the restrictions and requirements, what is the maximum concentration? Just so we have an idea, and maybe it's in the single digits and it's not a problem.
I think that area is so concentrated anyways, it's gonna kind of control itself. I don't.
Perhaps,
see
yeah,
that.
That was their feeling.
I don't know.
but-
That's why we put the 500 and the 300 feet setbacks from everything. That's a lot of area. And that's why it's limited to only.
Agree, because if
buildings.
you look at the map and when you map it out and look at the distances, that's all that'll fit.
All right.
It's not in the single digits, but it barely gets into the double digits. But then it's going to have properties that are occupied by viable businesses, most notably Initex. Not its main facility on Vinoy, but they have a facility at the corner of Hubbard and Industrial. So that's one. I'm going to take a look at a map right here to see if I can discern a little bit more.
Yeah, sir, did you have something? You want to come up?
Having a vertical, the way Mario described, vertical meaning that you're doing all 3 functions, you're growing, processing, and selling in a single facility is not something that's common everywhere. Westland had that in their ordinances, and the winners of that actually are still fighting with the city to try to downsize the project and not go through with the grow. Right now, as Mario stated, the grow is actually something that we're meeting the demand of the market. What we need is more stores to spread that out a little bit and have more retail opportunity to accommodate the customers that are having to travel places to get their needs. But your ordinance, with the 3 that are already here and 2 of them that are already somewhat pot committed, 1 that's fully invested, it's going to be a deterrent. You're not going to see a lot of people looking to come in and do that right now. If you look at the trends in Michigan, grows are way, way down in terms of investment. It's hard to get that money. People that would be putting up the money might question that in this market under the circumstances. So I think the risk of that is lower than it would have been a couple of years ago. And then when you were talking about the communities, Monroe Township actually had an uncapped township, but it was for all their C1 and 2 properties. So every area where there's a restaurant, a title company, a car wash, everything. The whole, at LaPliance on exit 11, there's an old outlet mall that was long ago abandoned. That has 15 stores between them, and 2 of the stores that are on the outlets are the 2 of the most viable, profitable stores in Michigan. Monroe just hit their limit, and I think that's what you were referring to in those communities. Most other, like Ann Arbor, had an unlimited number, but they buffered them between each other, so zoning actually limited the number. And again, they never got to the full number, even in Ann Arbor. And so it's just, there's gonna be some structural things as you're coming in later now, talking adult use. It's been 5 years since it was approved by the state of Michigan, 4.5 years since our first licensee. So we're a little bit further along than a few years ago where there was more risk at that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else? Any other comments?
No.
I'm just curious, Fred, do we have access to the number of what this would open up to? Is there a map like we had the first time when we looked at the clarifications?
Well, we know which streets would be available in the district, but I don't think we have a current map, do we?
I'm trying to pull up the map from, that we used for medical. My computer's not cooperating. But, like I said, it's in that intersection right there, and it's close to, in the teens, if the teens at the most.
Hanoi, Hubbard, Ford, and Park Lane or Industrial, the northernmost,
The northernmost would be Park Lane.
Park Lane. That's,
Yeah, because
it's gotta fall
Manor
within
Manor
that.
Park is too close to residential, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would definitely not be allowed on Manor Park.
Yeah, I think the thinking is we have a lot of vacancies in the industrial area right now, and this is one way to fill them up.
Yeah,
And make some money.
Yeah, and make a little money off them.
sure.
Somebody want to make a motion to recommend?
I'll make a motion to recommend.
A second.
Motion made to recommend approval to the council. Any comments or discussion on the motion? Take the roll, please.
Commissioner Walls?
Aye.
Commissioner Steenberg?
Aye.
Commissioner King?
Aye.
Commissioner Turnbull?
Aye.
Chairperson May?
Aye. Okay, motion is passed to recommend approval at the city council. Moving on to other business. We show no other business. Thank you. Commissioners' comments regarding planning and zoning matters? Mr. Walsh?
I think we got things moving. I see things moving in the city, so that's good.
Mr. Steenberg?
Nothing, thank you.
I'm good.
You good? Good? Good.
Nothing,
Brian?
nothing.
Nothing? Anything else?
No, nothing.
Did have one thing. Could we get an update?
Yeah, maybe Brian could take care of
An
that.
updated
for us.
zoning map?
Get an updated one? Oh, absolutely.
Maybe in the
Yeah,
next meeting?
mine, the one I have at
Yeah.
home is 2016. so-
Oh, okay. Yeah, you need a, yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Okay, the next regular meeting is Thursday, September 14th, 2023. If there's no other business, meeting's adjourned.